you for joining me for a special this week. I really feel it's very important that we focus and give a voice to the voiceless, that being people all across America, pollsters, volunteers at the polls in Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, who all have testified and believe they witnessed election fraud or irregularities with the 2020 general election. I know we've all heard it. It's over, right? Attorney General Barr said this week, look, the FBI hasn't found anything as of yet significant enough to change the outcome of the election, that being Vice President-elect, former Vice President, President-elect Joe Biden. I will get into all of this and more because we have a very special guest. His name is Ian Northon. He's a lead attorney in the Michigan election lawsuit for President Donald Trump. He's doing this actually on behalf of the Thomas More Society. We'll get into more of that in a moment. But first, I want to talk to you about Heat Holders, who is sponsoring this great podcast. I am so excited. You know, I've talked about it already. What great gifts that you can get for your family. You want to go to Heat Holders, heatholders.com. They make the warmest thermal socks around, keeping your feet warmer than just ordinary socks, even in the coldest conditions. Go to heatholders.com and enter the code Carter, that's CARTER, at checkout and save. Get this, 15% on all of your purchases. Receive free shipping as well with any purchase of $25 or more. There is no need for icy cold feet this winter. Just go to heatholders.com and use the code Carter. I've already bought a bunch of gifts there for my family. I know you will too. Okay, let's get back to what we're talking about here for this special, this Sara Carter Show special. It's about election fraud, and it's about the sanctity of our election. But more importantly, it's about listening to people, and it's about listening to people who are willing to put everything on the line to come forward because they believe that they witnessed election fraud, and they feel that it is their duty as Americans to tell the truth and to speak openly about it. I give them, so much. So they have so much courage. I give them so much kudos for doing this because it's so difficult to go public and talk about these things when there's so many people against you, particularly all of the mainstream media outlets out there. This is ridiculous. I've never seen anything like this in my life where people, because let's just be honest, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, PBS, I can keep going on and on and on, Bloomberg and others, the Daily Beast, they hate President Trump. They hate him. They wouldn't even care if the election fraud dossier was delivered by James Comey, their best friend, and left at the doorstep of the New York Times. I swear to you, if they found out there was a major scandal where there was election fraud, they would walk that dossier, a real one, not the fake one that they all wrote about, and they would burn it in the back. They would take it out back. They would put it in a trash can, a litter bin in New York City in some dark alley. They would set it on fire and go, "Ooh, I hope nobody ever finds out about that." That's what they do. I really do believe that. They don't want to talk about it at all. And they don't want you, the American people, questioning anything of it. They want to gaslight you with everything. Look, there was election fraud. We know that. We know it happens. It happens in every election. How much so, we don't know. But there were some pretty serious allegations. And I'm going to actually just go through a few of them before we bring in our expert attorney to talk about what's going on in Michigan. I want to go through a few of these. And I wrote a story at saracarter.com. I know you guys can go there and look at it yourself just to see, and answer these questions for yourself. There were experts, people from MIT, people that have studied math and laws of probability, and they were looking at the numbers and how the numbers fluctuated. And this was particularly in Arizona that I'm talking about right now, where they could see these fluctuations in numbers, and all of it was moving towards Biden. So much so, and I want to remember how to say his name, but Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, a world-renowned scientist, I think he presented the most compelling data at the hearing. He explained the only way for Joe Biden to have actually statistically caught up with Donald Trump was if Democrat votes came in at 130% for Biden. Can you believe that? And negative 30% for Trump. He said it's almost an absolute improbability, but no one even bothered to listen to him. No one bothered to listen to the guy who apparently invented email. It was just like, oh, no, you can't be. No, Biden's our guy. That's it. Biden, the globalist, is our man. If he can't do it, no one can. I swear they're going to have some kind of cheer for this guy all over the place. You know, former Vice President Biden is now the savior. All you have to do is go read Thomas Friedman's column spilling out his love. Thomas Friedman from the New York Times, a famous columnist. Read the column he wrote about President-elect Biden. How amazing Biden is. Just so extraordinary. Didn't ask him anything about the dealings with China, about Burisma, his son being on the board, getting paid, roughly $50,000 a month from a company that is allegedly corrupt. And, a gas energy company connected with Russia. Didn't ask him anything about all of the dealings with China. Didn't ask him anything about anything. Just said, what is it, man? I love you. You're coming back. You're making us whole again. We're going to go to all the best parties in Washington, D.C. now. We're going to get to hang out with you. We're going to get to go to your Christmas party. Biden, President Biden. How amazing. It's so amazing that, Thomas Friedman, I wrote a column about this, my own opinion about Thomas Friedman's opinion at SaraCarter.com. I wrote a column about this. I was just like, oh gosh, you guys don't even understand this. How crazy it is here in Washington, D.C. You're so lucky. All of you who live out there in the Midwest, all of you who live in beautiful small towns across America and don't have to deal with this nastiness out here. You can't imagine. Let me explain to you a little, because I live out here. I came out here. I came out here not from Columbia or New York University or the snobbery of all of the Wharton School or any of that. Now, I'm like you. I came out here. My mom worked in a factory for a while. My dad worked for Lockheed Martin. I'm like the daughter of an immigrant. Same old story, same old, just regular American. I come out here, and these reporters, so many of which are such snobs. They gallivant around Washington, D.C. at these parties. I'm sorry. Acting like they're better than everybody else in the world and acting like they know how your life is supposed to be. Like they want to make your life. They want to tell you how to live. And by the way, for the 73 million plus people that voted for President Trump, they think of you as deplorables. You're so whatever. You're so bourgeoisie, right? You're so like, stay over there, Trumpo, you Trump people. Stay over there, stay in your little houses. We don't care that you can't, afford milk. They don't think about these things. They do not think about these things. They want to party. Wait, mark my words. Wait until the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Remember the one that Trump wouldn't go to because they were just like going to eat him alive at the front room over at the Hilton out here in Washington, D.C. I just pictured all of these reporters jumping on top of him and like eating him up, right? And him being gone like zombies, right? The Walking Dead. I know it's such a weird picture when you think about it, but I pictured that. Wait until this year's April White House Correspondents' Dinner. Everybody's going to be snobby and kissing each other's butts and with the platitudes for Joe Biden. They're going to love him. They wouldn't even care. Joe Biden could go up there and talk about corn pop and how his blonde hair glistened in the sun as little children in the pool in Baltimore were fascinated by the hair on his legs because he was so white and blonde. They don't even care about that. They don't even care that he talks like that. They don't even care that he said, you ain't black if you don't vote for me, or they're going to keep you in chains. This guy is just like, could you even imagine if Trump said these things? The reason I'm bringing this up and the reason this is so important is because don't let them gaslight you. Don't let them fool you. You have a right to ask any question you want. This Michigan, election in Michigan, the election results in Arizona, the election results in Georgia and Pennsylvania and across this country. Those are important. We need to know what was going on. We have every right to ask those questions. Even if one person's vote was not legitimate, we got to get rid of it. Our country is worth more than just, we'll ignore that and move on. We won't pay attention. Oh, look at how they've made Rudy Giuliani, Jenna Ellis, anybody around Trump. They purposefully target them in the media. They make people look like conspiracy theorists. No, they're not. They actually have expert witness, expert testimony, experts that are coming out and saying, listen to me, America, look at what I saw. Can someone answer my question? And by the way, this is a big question. Before I get to Ian, before I go over to Ian Northon, why was everything against Trump? Like, if there's fraud, if there's mistakes, like just if there's mistakes, why are all the mistakes against President Trump and benefiting Joe Biden? Why? I mean, no one's even answered that question. Can anybody answer that question? Like, none of the mistakes benefited Trump. If they were mistakes, they all benefited Joe Biden. In fact, everything that happened benefited Joe Biden, not the American people, not President Trump. No, and I'm going to repeat this again. If there's any liberals out there, and I don't want to say liberals, I'm going to say leftists. If there are any of you leftists out there, Biden supporters listening to me, I'm going to say this again. Over 73 million people voted for President Trump, right? Legitimately, because there were no mistakes going in President Trump's direction. So you need to think about that. And we need to think about that. All of you out there, realize that we're not a small little group like CNN wants you to think, or MSNBC, or any of these other crazy major media outlets that want to control your life now, that are, as Greg Martini says, activist journalists. They are no longer these unbiased journalists they're not even just biased. They're like activists. They're like, we're going to do whatever we can to make America the way we want it. And that's what they're doing. Now, I have Ian Northon here. I know I've been talking about him quite a bit. This is the whole reason for doing this special. So please do not walk away from this podcast. You are going to want to hear what he has to say on the Michigan election lawsuit that they filed with the state Supreme Court. He's basically going to give you the layman's overview of the Michigan lawsuit and why you should care. This is also part of the Amistad effort with the Thomas More Society. This is very important. This is part of the effort by the Thomas More Society. You got to go there, look them up online. You're going to want to be a part of the Thomas More Society. You're going to want to see what they're doing, because they're doing this for you. They're doing this for me. They're doing this for our nation so that we don't go through this again. Thank you, Ian. Thank you so much for being on the Sara Carter Show, this special edition of the show, to talk to us a little bit about what's going on in Michigan. Since the rest of the media does not want to tell the American people what is happening in Michigan and with the Michigan lawsuit, that's why I brought you here. So first, tell us a little bit about yourself and about the Thomas More Society.
Sure. Well, I appreciate you having me on the show. I think this is important. First, right. I represent private clients, regular citizens, regular people in Michigan that didn't want their votes watered down. They saw things with their own eyes, and others. More than 3 dozen affidavits have been filed with the court, and they just want to make sure that their vote counts and illegal or unlawful votes don't. So I think that's important to put the focus where it belongs, which is on regular voters in Michigan, regular people. With that said, the Amistad project of the Thomas More Society has been watching these issues carefully. Election integrity is important, and they've been watching these issues for months. And I've actually was involved in lawsuits before the election. I'm not a Johnny-come-lately. We were concerned seriously about some absentee ballot issues that we saw during the primary over the summer, and then we also saw serious issues about funding, federal funding under the HAVA, or the Help America's Vote Act. Mm-hmm. And we saw those irregularities. And we filed suits over them, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. The very problems that we identified played out in real time in Michigan at a widespread scale that it surprised even us.
Oh, I know. And explain that a little bit so that the audience really understands what you're talking about there. I mean, these are issues that you saw previous. And in layman's terms, just tell the audience what this means and why Michiganians are fighting against this.
Sure. Well, it's real basic, right? Under our laws, under our election laws, those get passed a long time in advance, before a particular candidate is on the ballot or before a particular party is in play. And those laws are meant to be followed. And so if you make the rules up as you go and don't follow the laws, it invites the very problems the laws were designed to prevent. So for example, with absentee voting, that's something that Michigan allows for. You're supposed to sign your name, sign the ballot or sign the request to get a ballot, and then you sign your name on the back to turn it in so it gets counted. So there's 2 signature requirements to prevent fraud to get an absentee ballot in Michigan. We've got overwhelming evidence that ballots were being sent out unsolicited. In other words, someone didn't sign to get it. In fact, they didn't even ask for it, which suggests that they're being sent out and harvested by bad actors.
Do you have any idea how many of those are actually out there? Do you have an estimate, or do you not know?
Sure. No, we have a pretty good idea, and it's based on math, simple mathematics. So we use the Michigan election data. So now the Secretary of State and head of election here in Michigan has not released all of the information, which says, what are you hiding, right? This is public information,
why not?
right? But based on the election information that has been released, we use that to call people. We've made thousands, tens of thousands of phone calls and surveyed them. Did you ask for a ballot? The state shows that you asked for one. Did you ask for a ballot? And they would say yes, or they'd say no, right? They keep track of it. Did you vote? Yes or no. Did you vote in person or by absentee? And when you survey enough people, you start to get a data set that's scientifically significant. And so that data, those phone calls, we recorded them. And those recorded phone calls have now been turned over to the FBI. The LA branch office has asked for that information, and we've turned that over. That was part of the Stock project, anticipating what was really going on. But when you
so this is interesting. Yeah. Let me go right there, because this is what is driving everyone mad today. And I think you know where I'm going to go with this. Attorney General William Barr had an interview with the Associated Press. He talked about a number of issues, but when it came to the election, he made a comment, a statement that basically suggested that so far the DOJ, the FBI, has not found any sufficient evidence of election fraud to actually change the outcome of the election. That meaning that former Vice President-elect Joe Biden, I call him media-elect Joe Biden, media-elect Joe Biden is still media-elect Joe Biden. What did you take from that? Because I know that the FBI is requesting this information. Why do you think William Barr, or how do you think what he said affected what you are doing, more than how do you believe he feels about this, how it affected what you are doing? And then from there, are there still ongoing investigations throughout the country? Because I think a lot of people just went, what? There's no investigations? What's going on?
Right. So a couple of things. First, whether the Department of Justice is doing its job or doing its duty to look into these things, I can't really tell you, right? I don't know what investigations they've started. And even if I did, I couldn't comment on them, right? So I don't know what they've done, but I'll tell you, it's hard to count what you can't see, and it's hard to trust what you can't verify. And so here's a situation where I don't know what he's looked at, but to say such a remark like that on the front end, when our understanding is that they haven't been looking at this for 18 months like my team has, right? They haven't been looking at it every day, some 20, 22 hours a day since the election itself. We've done the analysis. I don't know if they have or not, right? We took this off of public election data in Michigan and other states and started to compare the data. So we've crunched those numbers. If they have, good for them, but it doesn't sound like they've done that work, right? So to comment on what an election or what an investigation shows when you haven't done an investigation seems to me as counterproductive, right?
It reminded me actually a lot of James Comey. Like when I was like, what's going on here? Did Barr just morph into James Comey deciding to talk about investigations before an investigation even started, or making comments, especially coming from the Attorney General? Let's talk about the affidavits, because this is very important. I believe as a journalist, and now I'm more of a columnist. I'm an opinion maker, but I used to, and I believed I was very good at it. Worked as an unbiased journalist covering the war in Afghanistan, Iraq, covering the drug cartels, immigration, just stuff like that. Not Washington D.C. swamp. I was not political in that sense until I started covering the Trump administration. But one of the things that I've seen is this inexcusable action by the media to even listen to the American people, this inexcusable behavior that basically has treated all of the people, expert witnesses, who have come forward and spoken to you and spoken to others in Arizona and Pennsylvania and Michigan, Georgia, about what they believe was election irregularities and election fraud, and have treated them with disdain and as if they were conspiracy theorists, and have just shunned them. Talk a bit about the affidavits and tell me why we need to listen to the Americans that were actual witnesses to this election. Sure. Based on what the media says, I mean, they're not paying attention.
Yeah, well, it's easy for commentators or even lawyers who don't actually practice law or go into a courtroom to talk about evidence, but evidence is the type of thing that you present in court. Evidence are things like eyewitnesses, like those affidavits say, I know with personal knowledge what I saw. Right? This isn't based on speculation or this could have happened or this might have happened. These are eyewitnesses that swore under penalties of perjury that they saw something with their own eyes. That is the definition of evidence. And it's not circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial is where you start to make logical inferences and based on one thing, maybe the next thing happened. That's good evidence too. It can be. But this is actually direct evidence. It's the most important kind of evidence. And so to me, to say that there's no evidence is irresponsible, especially when, as an officer of the court, I've spoken with these folks. My lawyers and my team have gone back and forth with them to make sure we understand them correctly before we put them at risk and putting their names under penalties of perjury. We've submitted these things to the court, and to say there's no evidence, you might disagree with it. You might have different theories about it. You might think it doesn't matter, right? The whole Hillary Clinton, what difference does it make, right? You might have arguments like that, but arguments are not evidence. And so to me, I think it's irresponsible to suggest that there's no evidence when in fact that's exactly what evidence means in a real court. And that's where we are right now. We're in front of the Michigan Supreme Court on an expedited basis.
And talk about those affidavits and what you've brought forth to the Michigan Supreme Court. What are you sharing with them? And how important do you feel that information is in your case?
Yeah, so two things. One, I mentioned those statutory violations, those things that we saw earlier before the election where we were concerned. And that goes to the rule of law, right? What role does each branch have in doing this, right? If the legislature says to follow the law, passes a law, it goes through the process, and then a Secretary of State, whether well-meaning or not, I think it's profoundly naive to think that if you flood the system with absentee ballots improperly, that the very things that you were trying to prevent wouldn't happen, right? But put that aside, put motives aside, it creates the opportunity. So those are statutory violations. And we even have admissions in affidavit from the head of elections admitting that he pushed out 74,000 ballots of this type, and we've got 350,000 or more unsolicited ballots. Yeah, those are outcome determinative type numbers, but they don't mean much unless you put them in context. So then when you take that and put it in real time with people who are processing the votes, right? We're counting the votes. There's laws for that too. So for example, in Michigan, the law says that if you want to change a ballot, it's called curing or duplicating, and there's any number of reasons, right? I've got a cup of coffee here. If I spill it on a ballot, it will not run through that machine. So there's a law that says if you want to duplicate that ballot, you have to write down the number. One person, a Democrat, and one person, a Republican, has to sign it, right?
Right, and this is the reason they do this is to prevent fraud, right?
That's right. You don't want just Republicans duplicating ballots. This is where somebody is making a new ballot for somebody else, right? And so you don't want just one party to be in control of that process. The law requires bipartisanship there. 2 signatures into the poll book for a new ballot. You throw out the old one, you replace it with one good one, so just one vote counts. Now that's a law, but it doesn't mean much unless you have an eyewitness saying there were no Republicans there, or there's no Republican signature, or give me the poll book so I can look at the signature, and that's not happening. And so those eyewitnesses tie the statutory violations that we warned about to real events. And now that starts to translate to votes. So for example, veterans ballots were not able to be run through the machines in Michigan. And so that's important that if you're a veteran, you want your vote to count, right? They're fighting in Afghanistan. They're fighting in Iraq. You know, when we ran elections for other countries and set up representative democracies for them, you know, there was a real interesting chain of custody, right? People see the optics in their mind, but you dipped your finger in ink, right? Purple ink.
I
So
was
you
there
knew,
when they did it. I was there in Afghanistan when that
right.
occurred.
And, you know, and it was a hallmark of representative democracy because you knew that person voted and you knew that person voted one time, right? Because the ink didn't wash off for a couple of days. So you couldn't come back in and vote twice. You couldn't vote for one for each finger, right? And if we can run elections like that in Afghanistan and Baghdad and in Iraq, why can't we do it in places like Livonia, Michigan, or Detroit, Michigan, right? And those are the chain of custody issues that are statutory. But when you have eyewitnesses saying those chains of custody were not filed or they were intentionally broken, now you start to connect the dots. I have more than 39 in fact, 39 affidavits from different people with personal knowledge all over the state saying they witnessed firsthand these irregularities. And there's several different categories.
39
right.
people. That's a lot of people to put to sign their name on an affidavit. This isn't just one guy or one lady working in one polling station. This is all across the state of Michigan.
That's correct. And
That's
so
incredible.
These are, you know, they primarily focus on the big population centers like Detroit. Detroit had kind of went on its own and consolidated all of its precincts and all of its absent voter counting booths into a single location. So here we're hearing about COVID and how dangerous the virus is.
Right.
And instead of spreading people out and decentralizing, which is what the law says, they used a special exception to the law to consolidate everything. Now, the cynic
Why did
in me,
they do that? Why did they do that?
Yeah, so the cynic in me says, you know, well, look, let's see who's in the counting booth. Now, we have evidence. We have evidence that and I don't want to say foreign as in foreign governments, but people from other than Michigan, right? Not Michiganders, but foreign influence from Mark Zuckerberg and his wife put over $400 million into local elections this cycle. Now, they did through charities like CTCL, the Center for Tech and Civic Life, $9.5 million poured into Michigan in violation of federal law. That's our allegation, or one of them. Now, why is that important?
Incredible. That's huge. Yeah. Why is it important? It is huge.
Well, it's because those consultants, those Zuckerberg paid consultants, were in the counting booth, but the bipartisan and Republican oversight was in the penalty box. You know, they did this in a hockey arena. So, you know, it's cold in Michigan, and so we make jokes about hockey. But the reality is why are Republican poll challengers and Republican inspectors kicked out, but Zuckerberg paid consultants are overseeing the counting rooms and the counting.
So why are they in there? What can they possibly do while they're in there? Like if I'm why would Zuckerberg, by the way, you know, he is a problem on Facebook for all of us conservatives. Every time I feel like I have to like put this is alleged and it's only my opinion. But if I was a Democrat, I would never get dinged. So so that people understand why these charities are so influential and what they can do and why those folks may have been there. Explain that so that we all understand.
Sure. Well, it creates uneven effect, right? So the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, and Michigan's too, requires what they call equal protection to avoid disparate impact or disparate treatment. Now, that's high-minded language, but what it means is if I have a veteran's ballot in one place, it should be counted the exact same way as a veteran's ballot someplace else. Now, I grew up in Michigan in a town with one stoplight. I'm kind of a country boy, so I apologize for the rural accent, right? But to me, the votes in my hometown of Osceola County or Lake County should be treated exactly the same way as Lansing or Detroit, Wayne County or Ingham County. And you don't have that when Zuckerberg and his consultants and his charities are paying people $50 to $60 an hour in those locations to cure ballots, to duplicate ballots. Right. And folks in my hometown are getting minimum wage or are volunteers. It creates
which means that some of the votes would get left. Like you're not having the same attention to the votes that a Zuckerberg $50 an hour paid person would pay attention to.
So that creates uneven treatment. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of those votes went for a different someone you didn't want, right? This isn't outcome determinative. This isn't about party. This is about process. So the point I'm trying to make is, we saw in Florida, I'm also licensed down in Florida. I lived down there for a time. In 2000, under Bush versus Gore, You remember the hanging chads where they were,
Yeah.
in one county, they're holding it up and looking at it and kind of, but they were counting it one
They're
way in one
flicking the
county,
chat.
right? Is it, and they had all these euphemistic names for it, right? But they would count it one way in one county and a different way in
Right.
another. And that was over just a few thousand votes, right? Broward County counted ballots one way, Palm Beach counted it differently. And the Supreme Court said you can't do that. You have to treat it the same way throughout the state. And so here, this isn't over just a few hundred ballots or a few thousand ballots. We've identified more than 500,000 unlawful ballots not following the statutes in Michigan based on Michigan's election data and our own experts.
Oh my gosh. And now we're seeing, I mean, they certified the election in Michigan. How does this happen? What is wrong with the Republicans on the state legislature there? I mean, what is going on here that nobody is fighting this, that people are like, okay, this is finally over. We're going to certify. Let's get those 16 electoral votes over to Biden. Goodbye. Let's shut the books and go away. That's what I feel like. I feel like the American people are being dismissed.
Well, I do think there's a risk of that, right? Some folks are saying, well, we don't want to, I think winter came early in Michigan, right? A lot of folks are in hibernation. They're just kind of asleep or they're on the sidelines. And so, I think it's tough because if they knew what I knew, if they were looking at this information and talking to these witnesses, where's the outrage, right? They would be upset because even well-meaning people, good-meaning people from the other side want fair elections, so, to me, it's really important that, that we pay attention, right? You can't be asleep at the wheel. You have to pay attention to what's going on. And I do believe, based on this evidence, as it's coming in, as it's being presented to courts, people are starting to take notice. They're sitting up in their chairs, they're leaning forward, and they're looking at the same things I am. And that's my hope in going to the Michigan Supreme Court, is they will look at this deliberately, right? They will look at it, they will pay attention to it, and start to say who needs to do what. There's still a little bit of time here. Let's get it right. We don't want a bad election, right? We want the popular vote to count, but you can't have a vote count that's illegal. You have to sort that out, pull that out, and make sure only lawful votes count. Otherwise, they're diluted or in some cases canceled out altogether.
Look, I'm coming to you from just two people talking and two Americans who care deeply about our nation. And as a lawyer, what happens? What happens to our country if we don't pay attention to this? What happens to our nation if we don't fix this?
Sure. Well, the good news is that we've had people before us go through this before. It's been a while, right? The last time Michigan passed an election law like this was in the 50s when LBJ was alleged, then senator, to have stolen a Texas election, right? So a bunch of states went through and added things about anti-fraud, right? And I don't want to take anything away from his presidency and all the difficult things he went to, but the point I'm trying to make is we went through it before in the late 1800s. So it's the last time, I don't want to get into the weeds, but it's called the Electoral Count Act of 1887. And it took about 12 or 15 years for Congress to figure out what they were going to do with contested elections. But they did. And they did so because 10 years earlier, there was a contested presidential election with widespread allegations of fraud and irregularity. So there's rules here. And as much as we want this to work, right? America's not a pure democracy, right? Pure democracies can get swayed, they can get bribed, they can get influenced. We've got a very diffuse system with a representative democracy. So the rules in place are actually put in place here by our supermajoritarian constitution, right? The vast majority of people voted to put that constitution in place to protect against improper influences along the spectrum there. So the good news here is there are ways to work through this, right? Michigan, on the one hand, is like everybody else. Nationally, at the top of the ticket, you've got to get this resolved by these deadlines, right? That's a requirement. But for the rest of the ballots, the rest of the ticket and the process, you've got more time. So my hope is that Michigan will take this seriously, ask those hard questions, ask the head of elections, ask the Secretary of State. Look, you had one job, you had one job was to pull off a clean election, and you didn't do it. Why are some 14% or 15% almost, 14% of the absentee ballots unlawful? We had more people vote than ever by absentee ballot, and that makes sense. People are staying home. People want to avoid the lines. They want to avoid COVID, but all the more reason to get it right. Why would you then waive the anti-fraud requirements? Why would you blow through the signature requirements? Why wouldn't
Or why
you
are
check
the
them?
numbers so off? Why are the statistically? Why are those the laws of probability, according to some experts that have testified on behalf of the Trump campaign, even in Arizona, showed just this disparity that just seems so improbable. Like one doctor from MIT said, literally 130% of Democrats would have had to have participated in the election, and then 30% of people that support Donald Trump would have had not to have participated in order for those numbers to be accurate. So I know you're busy. I don't want to take up all your time. I'm going to ask you two more questions. What can Americans do to make a difference? And if there was anything I left out, something that you believe is very important, something that you want to get across to all of our listeners here at the Sara Carter Show, and we're going to get this out on our website at saracarter.com. We're going to push it on my Twitter. We're going to send it out to everyone. I'm going to get Laura Ingraham to retweet this. I'm going to talk to everyone. I want everyone to know what you've had to say. One, what can Americans do to make a difference? And two, anything that you'd like to focus on that you think is important enough for the American people to pay attention to with this election cycle.
Sure. So two things. One, the first thing is these aren't just technicalities, right? Those rules were written for a reason and they should be followed. For example, in Michigan, you have a constitutional right to vote in secret. The vote should be in secret and the process should be open. Here, we've reversed those roles. The process is now shrouded and obfuscated, but the votes were not secret. We have affidavits of people pulling the privacy sleeves off, right? Pulling privacy sleeves off, and if they didn't like the result, they'd throw it in the trash and not count that vote. Based on our statistical data, more than 30,000 people say they voted, but their vote, according to election records, was not counted. Now,
that's incredible.
It's shocking, right? We've got, all of these unsolicited ballots, all of this ballot harvesting, but another one that I don't think Michigan folks know, and I don't know about other states, but in Michigan, for example, Rock the Vote. Rock the Vote is a partisan group. It is run by Hollywood elite and LA rock stars, right? They promote progressive causes. Michigan gave away.
I get emails from them. And I have no idea why. They're always asking me to rock the vote. I'm like, no, please take me off your list.
Yeah. So in Michigan, everyone's voter data and secret data has been given to Rock the Vote. Now let me say that again. If you live in Michigan and you're registered to vote, your social security number, your driver's license number, your address, your full name, your birth date, your eye color is given to Rock the Vote in real time. They have hooked up an API feed so they get real-time updates from the Secretary of State about everybody in Michigan. Now, it raises a real simple question. If their job is to register new people to vote, why do they need all the already registered people's personal information, my social security, my birth date, and everything else? No good can come of that. Why do they have my information as we sit here? Why do they have my client's information? Why do they have the justices, if they voted? Why do they have their information? It's improper.
Why do they have
it's
mine?
Shocking. Well, I don't know if they have yours, but you might ask your state, you might ask the state where you live in, have you made a similar arrangement with Rock the Vote? Ask those hard questions.
How is that legal? How is that legal? I mean, that this group gets, my social security, or a resident from Michigan social security, their driver's license, all of their detailed information. And why should they even have it?
No, why with no bid contracts under the cover of night, nothing of that adds up. Nothing of that makes sense. So that's one thing I want folks to know. And the other thing I want to say is, look, it's important that you talk to your legislatures, right? The legislatures are the one that have what they call plenary power. They're the ones that can fix this. And they're the only ones that can fix it under the U.S. Constitution. They have the ability to do new elections that are untainted by irregularity or lawlessness. They have the ability to seat electors if there's a problem, and they're the only ones that can fix it under the law as it exists now. Not as the law as somebody might want it to read, right? But as it exists right now. And so they're the only ones that can fix it. So call your legislators, ask them to pay attention. No more hibernation. Sit up straight. Ask those hard questions. It shouldn't leave it to a civil lawyer to ask those questions, right? They have subpoena power. Criminal investigations can subpoena people, haul them in, make them ask questions. I'm a civil lawyer trying to get my clients a fair shake. That's different than what they can do. They have the ability to really throw heavyweight punches, and I'm kind of dancing around the edges of the ring a little bit. But I'm in the arena, and I'm fighting hard for those clients.
Well, and they were given those powers by our founding fathers, who understood that this was a possibility that something like this could happen in our country. And they wanted to give the American people, hello, all of you are in charge. The government is not in charge of this. It's you and it's our legislators. Get them up. I feel like they are sleeping. I feel like they just were like, oh gosh, did somebody wake us up? Are we going to, we have to make a decision? We have to do this right now. And they're trying to hide again. That's horrible. Get rid of them if they're doing that.
Yeah. The other thing I'll mention, if you don't mind, the other thing that's important is that, you've got a situation here where everybody wants the same things. If you're a person of goodwill, right, you want a fair vote. You want it to be accurate. Our election officials take an oath under our Constitution so that the vote is accurate. It's marked with accuracy and integrity. You can't have either one of those two things if you're not following the rules as they are written. Right? And that's not me. Now, these aren't complicated rules that require 3 law degrees in order to interpret, right? It says things like signature. It says things like 2 people compare, not 1, right? These are basic chain of custody issues that if you watch, one of my favorite shows is Law and Order, right? If you watch Law and Order, every piece of evidence that goes in that police locker has a chain of custody. What happened to the ballots themselves? The ballots are supposed to come into the counting center with a seal. It's supposed to be signed. They're supposed to be opened up, signed, counted, and put back in, signed, sealed, and delivered to the next step along the way. Why aren't those logs being looked at? What about the computer tallies? How many votes came in after the deadline? Those are simple questions to ask that the Secretary of State and head of elections have the answers to, but they're not disclosing, they're not revealing, because I think they blew right through those deadlines, and they did so intentionally with the help of Mark Zuckerberg and his money, and the help of Rock the Vote, and so many other partisans that have unfairly come into our state and affected Michiganders all over and watered down our votes.
I've got to tell you, Ian Northon, you have really opened my eyes. I was already stunned and shocked by the behavior of the media, by what was happening across our country with this election. But just listening to you right now, I'm blown away with how terrible the situation is and what kind of a crisis we're really in. And if we don't deal with this head on, if our legislators don't deal with this, if we don't expose this, even as journalists or reporters to the American public, I'd hate to think what it's going to be like 4 years from now if we don't fix this today. I want to
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's my pleasure. Yeah, I was just going to say, yesterday we through the Amistad Project, we talked about 3 whistleblowers. One was a truck driver who had never voted. One was a mail, delivering ballots, delivering the mail between states, right? Filled out ballots for someone else's election. And he was the wrong guy. He just happened to pull that shift and they put his ballots on the wrong truck, right? He wasn't he wasn't in on it, but he blew the whistle on it. And, that's one whistleblower. The other whistleblower was a guy who was working in the post office, in Wisconsin. And he saw the same things. He was being told to backdate ballots so that they would meet these deadlines, right? And then he's a libertarian, right? And then the third one was a Republican who happened to be, part of Black Voices for Trump and others like my clients. And she was at TCF Center and saw some of these things with her own eyes. She signed an affidavit in my case. And they were at a press conference yesterday and made the news a little bit yesterday. But those whistleblowers are just regular people, right?
That's right. There are heroes because they can be called out. I mean, these are people that are coming out, putting their name on a piece of paper, signing it under penalty of perjury, right? I mean, they are saying, look, I am telling you the truth. I will sign my name to this. And they are real heroes because people are coming after them right now. And they're putting them out there. They're targeting them. And they're getting all this pressure from this, I mean, just so bizarre. Leftist. I don't even say liberal because what you're saying is true. And I want all of you out there, before I let you go, to just listen to what he said. Shouldn't everybody, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Green Party member, everybody who can vote in America, shouldn't you want it to be fair? Shouldn't you want to know that every legal vote was counted and that things were done equitably across the board? Shouldn't we want that? And if we don't, you should ask yourself why. And if your party doesn't want that, you should ask yourself why. I would be asking that of my political leaders. If I thought that they were cheating, I would want to know why. So should you. Thank you so much, Ian Northon, for being with us today. I can't tell you how important it was to have you on here, especially with what's happening right now in our country. I want people to be able to know more about your project and the nonprofit and what they can do to help fight these issues of election fraud. Where can they go?
Sure, they can go to the Amistad Project's website, got-freedom.org. They can Google Amistad Project of the Thomas More Society out of Chicago. Those are nonprofits, and they're not representing any particular campaign or particular policy. We're focused on election integrity. So if you're serious about helping, please, and if you know something, right, if you received one of these unsolicited ballots, if you were involved or asked to do something you knew wasn't right, trust your gut, come forward. And I think that's important too, right? We just want to get the truth. We want to tell the truth so that this doesn't happen in the future. We want every election to be fair, and then let the chips fall where they may, right? Let the best candidate win based on lawful votes, not illegal ones.
Yeah, and tonight's the big hearing. So this is going to be a big day for you. So thank you so much. I'll have all of that information on my website at saracarter.com. That way you can locate all of the issues here that were spoken by Ian Northon. You can go right onto the website and just one click away from helping fight election fraud in America, no matter who you are or what party you belong to. Thank you so much, Ian.
Thank you. Have a great day.
I have to tell you, that was the first time I ever had Ian Northon here on the Sara Carter Show, and I'm going to bring him back. I felt like I really have such a much better understanding. I mean, I was already concerned about election fraud, right? I know you were too. These are issues that I think, never even, I didn't even realize, folks, and I'm going to do a full special on this, that Rock the Vote had access to all of that data and information on Michigan citizens and residents. I mean, think about what is going on across the country. Think about if that happens. I mean, I don't know, maybe they have it on me. I was getting emails from Rock the Vote wondering, like, how are they sending me this? I've never signed up for them. I've asked to be removed and I'd get it again. So this is interesting. Do they have all my information, and why do they have it? And what about Mark Zuckerberg? I mean, this is just insane. When you think about the amount of money and power that big tech has, or any corporation for that matter. But think about big tech. It's not just a big corporation. It controls the flow of information. The media basically is at its beck and call, right? I mean, big tech can make you or break you. It can shadow ban you, which I've experienced, with Jack Dorsey and Twitter. It can basically refuse to validate who you are or give you, a check mark, like I'm fighting with Facebook right now in order to verify my account. I mean, these are people with so much power, apparently down to just the individual person, all the way to the elections and the people that they, I guess, donate money to, and their charitable organizations and the ones that they establish. So, I mean, we're a different country now. We are a different world. I'm going to tell you a story before I let you go. And it really hit me how different our nation is and our society. When I went to do an interview, this is so long ago. It was right after Director Hayden. He was the director, Mike Hayden, former head of the NSA, and then he went to be the director of the CIA. It was right when he left the CIA. I had interviewed him actually at CIA headquarters when I was with the Washington Times. We did a big editorial board there at CIA, and I spoke with him and interviewed him a number of times. He's a total never Trumper, hates him. He's probably like a Lincoln Project founder or something right now. But I went to meet with him. He had a firm here in Washington, D.C., and I went to meet with him. And I was asking him about, at that point in time, about our privacy rights and our, the issues surrounding our ability, to just be free from government prying eyes, right? To be Americans, to stand by our Fourth Amendment so we wouldn't have people like poking in our business or looking at everything we did on the internet. And I mean, this was, probably around the time of Edward Snowden and all of that. And he said to me while we were sitting in his office, and this was actually an interview that we did, and I think it was an interview that I actually did with the Blaze at the time. It was for the Blaze's Full Story, which is where I worked with Full Story Foundation, a foundation that was later established by Director Joe Weasel. He said to me, if anybody believes that they have privacy anymore, they are sadly mistaken. We no longer have any privacy. We live in a different world where we have basically given up all of our rights. We've basically given up everything ourselves. We put it all on Facebook, we put it on Twitter, and I said, "Oh, but we are lured into it." We don't imagine that when we put, we had turkey dinner with our grandma last night, or we bought a pair of Nike shoes or something, that all of the sudden that would be something that the government would collect. We never think that our driver's license or our family friends or our connections are being like stored up in some massive server somewhere in the United States, or that our phone calls are being tapped overseas, right? Because guess what? When you make a phone call in the United States, sometimes it travels across wires overseas too. And once it hits those wires outside of the US, anybody can be listening to you. This is what happened during the Trump administration. This is the reason why, from the very beginning, over 4 years ago, when I started writing these stories about President Trump and what was happening to our country, it wasn't just about President Trump. It was about trampling our rights and not standing up to this bureaucracy that is so out of control, folks, so out of control. It's so weird because we actually pay them their salaries, right? And they are now becoming the kings over us, their dominion over us. They're doing whatever they want to a large extent, violating our Constitution. And you just heard Ian Northon. You heard what he has to say, why he's fighting this. It's not because of President Trump. It's not because it's partisan. This should not be partisan at all. Right? We should all want free and fair elections. We should all fight for freedom in our country. We should all be grateful that we live in a nation where our founding fathers at least had the common sense and the foresight to know, okay, wow, we better give the state legislators, we better give these legislators some authority here in case something ever happens to our republic, in case there's cheating, in case there's problems with an election. And guess what? If they don't do their jobs, then we should get rid of them and vote them out and put in people that will actually do their job. Not a bunch of people that want attention, not a bunch of people that just want to sit around and say they're, working for the Michigan State Legislature. Look, hi, this is my name. And I'm just going to do nothing when I actually have to do something. We don't need those people. We need to wake up. And I know some of you, like all of us, were frustrated and angry and upset because guess what? The rug got pulled out from under over 73 million Americans. But we cannot give up. We must continue to fight for this great nation. We must continue to call out these bad players. We must continue to love this country no matter who's president of the United States. And we've got to fight for it. We cannot give up now. We have got to keep doing it. Thank you so much for being a part of this special on the Sara Carter Show today. I will be back with you like always, multiple times during the week. And, if you love this podcast, if you want to hear more podcasts, I'm thinking about expanding, doing maybe 4 or 5 days a week. I would love to do that. I think the producers are going crazy back there right now that I said that. But please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe and give us a 5-star rating and give us a review. We always read your reviews. Again, thanks so much for being a part of the Sara Carter Show. With you, with me, we are taking the story back. God bless.